I had a perfectly reasonable explanation for why I kept ending up in his office. The reports, the briefings, the Eastern supply documents that could have been sent by messenger, but were, I told myself, better delivered in person. For efficiency. Miguel never questioned it. He'd just look at me over his glasses when I sat down and go back to whatever he was writing. I told myself that was fine. South Tower office, late afternoon. He was at his desk when I walked in and closed the door behind me. He said I didn't have a meeting here, without looking up. I told him I knew, and sat down anyway. I watched him decide whether to respond to that. He didn't. So I asked if I could say something without him taking it badly. He said I could ask. Still not looking at me. I asked about his heat, how he was managing it. That got him to set down his pen. He looked at me and said, suppressants. Standard medication. Then he said, why? Like it was one word. I told him the strong ones left him down for a full day after. That I'd checked the scheduling records. He repeated that back at me. You checked my scheduling records. Flat. Unimpressed. I told him our cycles were close enough to coordinate, that if we used each other instead of medication, he'd be functional in half the time. I would too. I said it was more efficient. I said it like I was presenting a supply route adjustment. Casual. Like I hadn't been sitting on it for 2 weeks. He looked at me for a long moment. I was almost certain he was about to tell me to get out. He said, all right. I blinked. I asked if that was it. He asked if I wanted a longer conversation about it. I said no. No, that's fine. He picked up his pen. I sat there for another hour pretending to read a document, and the whole time I was thinking about that answer. One word. Before I finished the sentence. I told myself he agreed because it was logical. Because Miguel Voss doesn't make decisions for any other reason. I almost believed it. Almost. The Omega Strategist, full story available now. Welcome to the Portal Library. Step through and let the magic begin. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment if you'd love more stories or have a request. New videos uploaded every Friday. The Omega Strategist, Auric Empire, a BL short story. Chapter 1. The Only One in the Room. Varenheim Imperial Academy, Northern Wing. Year 412 of the Auric Empire. The strategy hall had 12 seats. Miguel occupied one of them. The other 11 were alphas, which was unremarkable to everyone in the room, including Miguel. His admission had come with none of the usual paperwork delays, none of the committee reviews that other Omega applicants had reportedly encountered. Not that Miguel had looked into that, particularly. His family's name was old and always opened doors for him. That was his birthright. The alphas in his cohort were not cruel, but calculative. They called him Strategist Voss in the halls, used his family title correctly, never left him out of any study group invitation, but never actually expected him to show. The invitation was a formality. His presence would have made them uncomfortable in ways they couldn't quite articulate, so they arranged, quietly and without discussion, for it not to happen. Miguel noticed, but he didn't care, as he preferred working alone. The other Omegas were a different matter. Their wing was on the east side of the academy grounds, past the rose garden that nobody used in winter, and the covered walkway that smelled permanently of lamp oil. Social placement track, mostly court etiquette, household management, the kind of curriculum that prepared you for a life organized around someone else's ambitions. Miguel had walked past that wing twice, and both times kept moving. He was crossing the main courtyard on a Wednesday afternoon, annotating a supply projection he'd lifted from the second-year military history archive, when one of them fell into step beside him. She was small, quick-moving, with ink on 3 of her fingers, and the particular expression of someone who had rehearsed what they were about to say. "You're Miguel Voss," she said. "Yes," he said, and did not stop walking. "I'm Sarah, from House Aldrin. My mother knows your father." She paused. "We've been watching your projections in the East Wing, the ones you submitted for the autumn assessment. The approach to the river garrison problem is different from anything Instructor Kane has proposed." Miguel glanced at her for the first time. She had brown eyes and a directness to them that was, he registered, unusual. "Kane's approach is wrong," he said. "He's optimizing for optics rather than outcome. The garrison needs resupply access, not a defensible perimeter. Anyone with the actual troop movement numbers would see that." "The East Wing doesn't have access to the troop movement numbers," she said. He hadn't known that. He hadn't thought about it. "That's a curriculum problem," he said, and turned left at the stone arch toward the main library. She stopped at the arch. He didn't look back. Later in the library, he considered whether to pursue the conversation. The observation about Kane's projection was accurate. He thought about it for approximately 4 minutes, decided the East Wing curriculum was an administrative issue and not his issue, and returned to the supply projection. He did not think about her again for the next 3 academic years. The Auric Imperial Palace, capital Varenheim. Year 415. The empire was expanding. It had been expanding for most of Miguel's lifetime, pushing east into the mountain provinces, south toward the trade coast, and the court had the particular restless energy of an institution that had grown faster than its own administrative capacity. Half the cabinet meetings were arguments about jurisdiction. The other half were arguments about funds allocation. Miguel found it fascinating, and also deeply inefficient, which were not mutually exclusive. He had placed first in the imperial strategic examination a few months ago, which had earned him an assistant strategist appointment and a small office in the South Tower, with a window that faced the wrong direction. He spent very little time in it. Instead, he spent considerably more time in the rooms where decisions were actually made, the War Council antechamber, the resource allocation reviews, the informal briefings that happened in the corridor outside the council chambers where half the real conversations took place. He was 23. He was the youngest assistant strategist in 4 decades. He was an Omega, which the cabinet was aware of and dealt with by simply not discussing it directly. The offers had started about 6 months in. The noble families with sons of age had begun making inquiries. Lord Carveth sent a dinner invitation that Miguel declined twice before accepting once, out of curiosity, and sat through 2 hours of being told how impressive he was, while the Lord's eldest watched him with the focused attention of someone calculating their every move. House Aldrin sent a formal letter requesting a meeting between families. 3 separate council advisors had mentioned, in passing, how much they valued the connection between talented young officers and established houses. Miguel kept a list. It was useful to know who wanted what from him, and he was relieved to know that what they wanted was not primarily him, but the accolade and his family power. He was an Omega with a Voss name and a first-place examination score. To the right marriage, he was a transfer of status in both directions. He understood this. He was not particularly bothered by it. He had no intention of being anyone's transfer of anything. The resource allocation review on the 14th of Cold Month had 17 people in the room. Miguel was the most junior by title. He was also the only one who had read all 4 of the underlying reports, which became evident approximately 20 minutes in, when the discussion of Eastern garrison costs revealed that 3 of the senior advisors were working from different versions of the same document, 2 of which were outdated. He said so, precisely, without particular affect. The room went quiet. Lord Harwick, senior military advisor, cleared his throat. "The Voss boy makes a point," he said. Miguel looked at his notes. He had 4 more. There were 3 princes present. The eldest rarely attended these sessions. The second, Prince Edrin, had the studied disengagement of someone who had learned that appearing interested in administrative detail was politically costly. The third, younger, quieter, positioned at the far end of the table. Second sons cannot inherit the throne, so they were tended to be treated as backup. Miguel noticed the third prince observing him, but chose to pay him no mind. The meeting ended. People dispersed into the corridor. Miguel was gathering his reports when he heard some footsteps stop near him. "You mentioned a 5th discrepancy," the third prince said, "in the supply route projections. You noted it and then moved past it." Miguel looked up. The prince was perhaps 2 years older than him, with the kind of face that gave away very little, and a kind of stillness that was either natural or extremely practiced. It was addressed by inference when Lord Harwick corrected the cold pass estimate. Miguel said, "I'm asking why you let him take credit for it." Miguel considered this for a moment. "Because the correction needed to come from someone with the authority to make it stick," he said. "It was more efficient." The prince held his gaze for a beat longer than was strictly necessary. "Prince Aldrich," he said, "in case that wasn't in your notes." "It was," Miguel said. Something shifted briefly in Aldrich's expression. He picked up his own documents and left. Miguel stood in the mostly empty room for a moment. He looked at the door. Then he added a line to his list, under a new column he had not needed until now. Chapter 2. Arrangements. The Auric Imperial Palace, capital Varenheim. 3 months after Miguel's appointment. Aldrich started showing up everywhere. Not in any way Miguel could formally object to. He appeared at the end of allocation reviews, waiting in the corridor as if he had been passing by. He turned up at the South Tower twice in 1 week, with documents that could have been sent by messenger. He attended a session of the War Council antechamber that, as far as Miguel could determine, he had no particular reason to attend. The palace rumors started before Miguel caught up to them. He became aware of it through a comment from one of the senior scribes, delivered in the careful tone people used when they were conveying gossip they wanted credit for, but not responsibility for. Apparently, the Third Prince's movements had become something of an informal topic. Apparently, Miguel's name came up in those conversations with some regularity. Miguel filed this and continued working. What he did do, about a month in, was start mentioning Aldrich when the marriage inquiries came. Lord Carvet's secretary arrived with another dinner invitation. Miguel said he had a prior engagement with the Third Prince. House Moret sent a letter. Miguel mentioned in his reply that his schedule had been considerably occupied by advisory meetings requested by Prince Aldrich. It was not entirely untrue. Aldrich did request his time with some frequency. Miguel had simply begun treating those requests as a resource. It worked better than he expected. The inquiries slowed. 2 houses withdrew entirely. Whatever the Third Prince's position in the line of succession, his proximity to Miguel apparently read as a claim, and most families preferred not to compete with the imperial household. He did not tell Aldrich he was doing this. Aldrich found out anyway. He came to the South Tower on a Tuesday, which was not unusual, and closed the door behind him. I heard something, he said, that I want you to clarify. Miguel set down his pen. House Moret withdrew their inquiry, Aldrich said. I've also been told that Lord Carvet's invitation was declined on the grounds of a prior engagement with me. An engagement I have no memory of. It was easier than explaining that I wasn't interested, Miguel said. You used my name without telling me. Yes. Aldrich looked at him. Miguel looked back. I wasn't aware, Aldrich said, that we had that kind of arrangement. We didn't, Miguel said. Do you have a problem with it? A pregnant pause engulfed the room. You assumed I wanted something from you, Aldrich said. You've been in or near my office 11 times in 3 months, Miguel said. Either you want something, or you have no other way to spend your time. I assumed the former. If I was wrong, tell me, and I'll find another excuse for the Moret letter. Aldrich was quiet for a moment. You weren't wrong, he said. Then we understand each other, Miguel said, and picked up his pen. Aldrich did not leave immediately. He stood near the door for a moment that stretched slightly past comfortable, then pulled a chair from the wall and sat down without being invited to. He opened his own documents. They worked in silence for 2 hours. When Aldrich left, he said nothing. Miguel did not look up. About 6 weeks later, they were in Miguel's office again, late afternoon. Miguel was finishing a projection on mountain pass accessibility. Aldrich was reading a supply manifest and had been quiet long enough that Miguel had almost stopped registering his presence. Can I ask you something? Aldrich said, without you taking it badly. You can ask, Miguel said. Your heat cycle, Aldrich set down the manifest. How do you manage it currently? Miguel looked up. Suppressants, he said. When I can't schedule around it, I use the standard medication. It keeps me functional. Mostly. Mostly, Aldrich said. The stronger suppressants work for about 40 hours, and then there's a recovery day, whether I want one or not, Miguel said. It's a known limitation. I plan for it. Aldrich was quiet for a moment, with an uncomfortable expression, deciding on his next words carefully. I'm going to suggest something, he said, and I want you to understand that I'm not expecting you to agree, and if you tell me to drop it, I will drop it. Just say it, Miguel said. My rut and your heat are close enough in cycle that we could coordinate, Aldrich said. If we were to use each other rather than medication, you'd have full function within a day, instead of 2. I'd have the same. It would be more efficient for both of us than the alternatives. He said it the same way he said most things, without particular expression, as though he were presenting a logistical option. Miguel looked at him. You've checked our cycles, he said. I had access to the scheduling records, Aldrich said. Yes, there was a pause. All right, Miguel said and returned to the mountain pass projection. Aldrich blinked, refusing to believe that Miguel actually agreed to his proposition. That's it, he asked. Did you want a longer conversation about it? Miguel said. No, Aldrich said, after a moment. No, that's fine. He picked up the supply manifest. Miguel could tell without looking that he was not actually reading it. They were careful about their meetups. Aldrich had a private set of rooms in the east wing of the palace that were not on the primary household circuit, left over from when he had been assigned there as a child, and never reassigned. Miguel came through the side entrance to not alert the staff. The king had 3 sons and managed them accordingly. The eldest was groomed, the second was managed, and the third was tolerated as long as he remained unremarkable. Aldrich understood his position. He did not have the luxury of scandals. Miguel had his own reasons for discretion. The inference would be immediate, and he knew it, had known it going in. He was an Omega, who had declined every formal inquiry, and was known to spend time with the third prince. The conclusion people would draw was the obvious one, and the obvious one was not entirely wrong, which made it more irritating and made him doubt his decision at times. The whispers started within a month. He heard them the way he heard most things, indirectly, through the slight adjustment in how certain people spoke around him, the particular way conversations paused when he entered a room. The household Omegas who managed the palace social calendar stopped including him in the informal correspondence they circulated among themselves, which he only noticed because he had been included before. One afternoon in the eastern corridor, he passed two of them going the other way. They did not acknowledge him. One said something to the other, low, and the other glanced back. Miguel kept walking. It was not the first time someone had decided to dislike him, and the reason this time was at least partly his own doing. He was not going to apologize for a practical arrangement to people who would not have said anything to him regardless. Nobody was saying it to his face, which meant nobody expected a response. He was aware that this reasoning had a flaw somewhere, but he did not spend time looking for it. The campaign proposal had been in Miguel's notes for 2 months before he put it in front of any official. The Eastern Mountain Territory was the Empire's open question. The expansion south had been clean. Trade routes and coastline, people who largely preferred commerce. The mountains were different. Difficult terrain, scattered settlements, wildlife that did not feature in any imperial survey because no imperial survey had gotten far enough in. Beyond the range, possibly nothing. Possibly something. The map stopped at the tree line, and the cabinet treated that boundary as a wall. Miguel found it an obvious problem. You could not plan resource allocation for territories you hadn't mapped. You could not know if the mountain passes were a threat or an opportunity without sending someone through them. The campaign he was proposing was not a conquest, it was a survey in force. A column organized enough to handle resistance, mobile enough to move through uncertain terrain, with strategic oversight that could adapt to what they found. He put it in front of Auric first. You want to lead it? Auric said, reading. I want to plan it and have operational authority, Miguel said. There would be a military commander for the column itself. The cabinet will say you're not qualified to hold that authority. The cabinet said I was not qualified to hold an assistant strategist appointment, Miguel said. I have the examination score in the top position for the 4th consecutive cycle. I am the only person in that building who has read the full survey on Eastern terrain limitations. If they want someone less qualified to plan this, they are welcome to name them. Auric looked at him over the documents. You've already written the full proposal, he said. I wrote it 6 weeks ago, Miguel said. I was waiting to see if anyone else would notice the problem first. And if I back this, Auric said, it goes in front of the council with my name on it. Your name carries weight my rank doesn't, Miguel said. You're the king's son. That's worth something in a council room even if it isn't worth anything in the succession game. You know that. Auric was quiet. He turned to the next page of the proposal, then the next. The contingency plan for hostile territory contact is underdeveloped, he said. Page 9, Miguel said. I noted it. I need better intelligence on what's actually at the range boundary before I can develop it further. The campaign itself would generate that intelligence. So the proposal funds its own missing section, Auric said. Yes, Miguel said. Auric set the documents down. I'll back it, he said. Miguel nodded and reached for the proposal to make a note in the margin. Auric watched him do it. You knew I would, Auric said. I thought it was probable, Miguel said. You find the Eastern Territory problem as frustrating as I do. You've mentioned it 3 times in the last 2 months. You counted, Auric said. I count everything, Miguel said. The proposal went to the council the following week. Miguel presented it himself. His family name opened the door. His examination record kept it open. Auric's backing closed the argument. The assignment came through on a Thursday, brief and formal. 1 line authorizing the Eastern Mountain Survey campaign, with Assistant Strategist Voss, in operational command of planning and oversight. Miguel read it once, set it aside, and went back to the projection he had been working on. I hope you are enjoying this story so far. Let me know in the comments below what you think of the main character so far. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Chapter 3. The Eastern Range. Eastern Mountain Territory. Auric Empire. Campaign Week 1. The map stopped at the tree line. Miguel had known this going in and had planned for it, which meant the column moved slowly and measured everything twice. Terrain readings, water sources, vegetation density. Every scout report came back to him before it went anywhere else. Auric commanded the column and kept the men in order. Miguel told him where to point them. It worked because they had stopped needing to explain themselves to each other. Somewhere around the third month in the palace, Aldrich would look at the map, look at Miguel, and move. Miguel would hear a report from the front and have the adjusted route ready before Aldrich finished reading it. The officers noticed. They said nothing because the column was moving efficiently, and nobody argues with results. The first 2 weeks were difficult for the expedition due to the terrain. Dense forest, elevation changes the original surveys had estimated badly, 2 river crossings that required improvised solutions. Miguel recalculated the supply schedule 4 times. He slept less than he should have, and ate when he remembered to. By week 3, they found people. The settlements in the eastern range were not what the cabinet had imagined, which was raiders and wilderness. They were farming communities, mostly, built into the lower mountain slakes, where the soil was workable. They had been there for generations, and had developed a reasonable suspicion of anyone arriving with a military column. Miguel had prepared for this too. He had drafted a contact protocol before they left the capital. Approach in small numbers, no weapons visible on the lead party. Bring trade goods rather than imperial seals. Listen before speaking. Aldrich had read it and said it was more diplomatic than anything the Foreign Affairs Office had produced in a decade. Miguel had said that the Foreign Affairs Office had never had to negotiate with people who had no reason to trust them. It took 4 days with the first settlement, then 2 with the second, because word had traveled ahead of them. By the 5th settlement, the headman came out to meet them before the lead party had finished dismounting. What the settlements wanted was straightforward. The bandits cleared from the northern passes, which had been disrupting their trade routes for 3 years, and some assurance that the Empire's arrival did not mean the end of their governance structure. Miguel had anticipated the first. The second required a letter back to the capital, which he drafted himself, proposing a tributary arrangement that preserved local leadership under imperial oversight. The bandit situation in the northern passes took 11 days and went more cleanly than Miguel had projected, partly because the settlements provided information the Empire didn't have, and partly because Aldrich was methodical in a way that left nothing to chance. When it was done, 2 of the settlement headmen sent their own messengers back toward the capital with accounts of what had happened. They wrote those accounts themselves, in their own words. Miguel hadn't planned that. He noted it as a variable he should have anticipated. By week 6, the column had mapped the full eastern range, cleared the passes, established 4 provisional aid posts, and entered into agreements with 11 settlements covering territory that doubled the Empire's eastern holdings on paper. Aldrich sent the formal report to the capital. Miguel sent the operational summary, the maps, and a proposed administrative framework for the new territory. The response from the capital took 8 days. It came back in the king's own seal, which was unusual for a field communication, and said very little, except that the column was to hold position, pending further instruction. The officers celebrated. Aldrich received them in the main tent, and let it run an hour, before he found a reason to step out. Miguel was at the eastern perimeter, looking at the pass. "You should be in there," Aldrich said. "I know," Miguel said. He didn't move. Aldrich stood beside him and waited. "The administrative framework will need revision before they'll pass it," Miguel said. "Lord Harwick will object to the tribute rate." I said it low deliberately, but he won't see it that way. "I need to adjust the language in Section 4 before anyone else reads it as a precedent." "Miguel," Aldrich said. "The eastern settlements will also need a permanent liaison appointed within 60 days, or the agreements will start to erode. I have 3 candidates ranked. I need to write the recommendation before we break camp." "Miguel." "What?" Miguel said. Aldrich looked at him. "When did you last eat?" he said. "This morning." "It's evening," Aldrich said. Miguel said nothing. "You've been at this perimeter for 2 hours," Aldrich said. "You left the tent before the report was finished, and you've been standing here in the cold, working through the administrative framework in your head. I know because I know you." "I'm fine," Miguel said. Aldrich didn't respond to that. He took off his outer cloak and set it over Miguel's shoulders without asking. Miguel opened his mouth and then didn't say anything because he was in fact cold and had not registered it until that moment. They stood there for a while. He called for the camp physician 3 days later, at an hour when the camp was quiet and there was no reasonable chance of being seen. He had been telling himself it was the travel, the irregular schedule, the disrupted sleep, the change in food and water. These were all reasonable explanations, and he had cycled through them with the same rigor he applied to everything else, and they kept not adding up. The physician was discreet. Miguel had selected him partly for that reason. The confirmation took less than 10 minutes. Miguel sat with it for a moment. Then, he thanked the physician, asked him to keep the visit out of the formal record, and went back to his tent to finish the Section 4 revision. He had a recommendation letter to write. He had a supply inventory to review before they broke camp. He had, he calculated, approximately 3 months before the situation would require active management. And by then, they would be back in the capital, and he would have the campaign behind him, and he would have the standing to push for the lead strategist appointment. And once he had that, he could think about the rest. He put it in a column in his head, next to everything else, and kept working. Auric had been watching him for 2 weeks. He knew Miguel's patterns well enough by now to notice when they shifted. And they had shifted. He waited until the camp was making preparations to move, when there was enough activity around them that a conversation could happen without an audience. "I need you to tell me something," he said. Miguel was reviewing the break camp checklist. He did not look up. "The physician," Auric said, 3 nights ago." Miguel set down the checklist. "It's not something that affects the campaign," he said. "That's not what I asked," Auric said. Miguel looked at him. Auric looked back and his expression was stern but calm. "You know," Miguel said. "I've suspected for about a month," Auric said. "I wanted you to tell me yourself." "And if I hadn't," Miguel said, "then I would have asked," Auric said, "which is what I'm doing now." Miguel was quiet. Outside the tent, the camp was loud with movement, and he was aware, suddenly, of how much effort it had taken to hold this particular thing at a distance for weeks. "I'm aware of the situation," he said. "I have a plan for it. When we return to the capital and the appointment is confirmed, I'll have the standing to manage what comes next properly. It's a matter of sequence." "A matter of sequence," Auric said. "The campaign is the foundation," Miguel said. "Without it, any accommodation I ask for reads as an Omega asking for accommodation. With it, it reads as the lead strategist making a request." "The distinction matters, so you were going to wait," Auric said. "I am waiting," Miguel said. "It's managed." "Miguel, I'm not asking about the appointment." Miguel stopped. "I'm asking," Auric said, "why you didn't tell me." The question sat between them. Miguel had 3 answers prepared and none of them were the right one, which he knew because he had been a strategist long enough to recognize when his own reasoning had a gap. "Because it's mine to handle," he said finally. "Everything I have, I've built on the basis that I handle things. The moment I bring this to you, it becomes something you carry for me. And then it becomes the reason I got the appointment, the reason the campaign succeeded. I won't have that." "That's not how I would see it," Auric said. "It doesn't matter how you see it," Miguel said. "It matters how everyone else does." Auric was quiet for a moment. "I understand that," he said. "I do. But you're telling me that you've been managing this alone for weeks and your plan was to keep managing it alone until we got back, and then continue managing it alone until the appointment cleared. And then at some point in that sequence find time to not be alone with it." Miguel didn't answer. "I'm not asking you to announce it," Auric said. "I'm asking you to let me be in the same room as the truth. That's all." The camp noise continued outside. Someone called an order across the clearing. A horse shifted. "I wasn't going to get rid of it," Miguel said, "in case that was a concern." "It was," Auric said, after a moment. "I didn't know how to ask." "It's not something I'd do as of right now," Miguel said. "I just needed the campaign finished first. I need to be more than this first." "You're already more than this," Auric said. "Not on paper," Miguel said. "Not in a way that survives me being absent from a council room for at least 6 months." Auric crossed the tent and sat down across from him. "Then we make sure to plan for our child together," he said. "That's not how this works," he said. "It is now," Auric said, "if you'll let it be." Miguel sat with that for a long moment, then he picked up the break camp checklist. "The Section 4 revision is done," he said. "I want to review the liaison candidates with you before we leave. You've met 2 of them. Your read on people is better than mine." Auric took the checklist from him and set it aside. "Later," he said. "Eat something first." Miguel clicked his tongue. But he didn't argue. They broke camp the following morning and turned the column west toward the capital. The settlement sent representatives to see them off, which had not happened on any imperial campaign in recorded history. Word traveled faster than the column did. By the time they reached the first way station, a messenger from the capital was already waiting with a summons from the king. Not for the column, for Auric specifically. Auric read it, folded it, and handed it to Miguel without comment. Miguel read it. He looked at the road ahead. "The king wants to discuss the Eastern Territory," he said. "That's what it says," Auric said. "He used your formal title," Miguel said. "He hasn't used your formal title in written correspondence before." Auric said nothing. "The settlements sent their own accounts," Miguel said. "The cabinet has them by now. The king has them by now. And now he wants you specifically." He folded the letter. "This is not a conversation about territory." "No," Auric said. "It isn't." They rode in silence for a while. "You knew this was possible," Miguel said. Aldrich said, I didn't plan for it. I did, Miguel said. Aldrich looked at him. The administrative framework, Miguel said. The liaison structure. The tribute rate. The way the campaign report was written. I built it so that whoever oversaw this campaign would have a clear record of your governance capability. I knew what the settlement accounts would indicate. The outcomes were predictable if the approach was right. He paused. I didn't tell you, because you would have made different decisions if you'd known what I was aiming for. Aldrich stared at him. You planned the succession angle? He said. I planned a campaign that produced results, Miguel said. What the king does with those results is his decision. But I made sure the results were legible. Aldrich was quiet for a long moment. You're going to have to stop doing that, he said. Doing what? Miguel said. Planning things without telling me, Aldrich said. I believe we had this conversation before. Miguel looked ahead at the road. I'll consider it, he said. Aldrich made a sound that was not quite a laugh. Miguel did not look at him, but something in his expression shifted, briefly, before he straightened up. The capital was 12 days west. The eastern range was behind them, their accomplishments written into the Empire's record in ink that would not fade. Miguel had a child to account for, a throne to secure, and was no longer content to stay unremarkable. Chapter 4: What Gets Built. The Auric Imperial Palace, capital Varenheim. The king received Aldrich in the throne room, which he had not done since Aldrich's formal presentation at age 7. Miguel stood 2 rows back among the cabinet, in his position as assistant strategist, and watched the room recalibrate in real time. The Eastern Campaign report had circulated for 4 days before their arrival. The settlement accounts had circulated longer. Every person in that room had read them, and every person in that room was now looking at the third prince with calculation in their eyes. The crown prince stood to the king's right. He gave nothing away. Prince Edrin, to the left, was watching Aldrich with an envious expression Miguel had seen on Lord Carvat's eldest. The king spoke for 11 minutes. He used Aldrich's formal title 4 times. The succession was not announced that day. It moved the way these things moved, through closed sessions, through back-channel pressure, through the slow accumulation of positions declared and positions withdrawn. Miguel was not in most of those negotiations. Edrin made his move 6 weeks in, aligning with 3 of the older cabinet families, and presenting a governance proposal that was, Miguel noted, largely derivative of the Eastern Campaign's administrative structure. He had copied the approach without understanding what had made it work. Miguel drafted Aldrich's counter in an afternoon. The Crown Prince requested a private meeting with Aldrich on the 43rd day. Miguel was not invited. Aldrich came back 2 hours later, sat down in the South Tower, and was quiet for a long time. He wants the Eastern Territory, Aldrich said finally. I know, Miguel said. You knew? Aldrich said in a surprised tone. He's been watching the settlement report since week 2 of the campaign. He requested 3 separate briefings from the Foreign Affairs Office on Eastern Territorial Administration. He's not interested in the throne. Aldrich looked at him. He told me the same thing, he said. He said this is the first decision he's made that felt like his own. Miguel said nothing. You were going to suggest the Eastern posting, Aldrich said. I had the letter drafted, Miguel said. Your brother got there first. Aldrich was quiet again. Then he picked up the counterproposal and read through it. The Eastern appointment formalizes his exit from the succession, he said. It also gives him something to build, Miguel said, which is what he actually wants. Aldrich signed the letter of appointment that evening. The Crown Prince left for the Eastern Range 12 days later. He did not look like a man who had lost anything. Edrin conceded on the 68th day, which was faster than Miguel had projected. The king's formal declaration came a week after that. Prince Aldrich, 3rd son of the Auric throne, named interim emperor, to govern in preparation for full coronation. The court assembled for the declaration ceremony. Miguel stood in his assigned position and watched Aldrich receive it with the same stillness he brought to everything. Afterward, in the corridor outside the throne room, one of the senior scribes congratulated Miguel on his patron's elevation. Miguel looked at him. My what? He said. The scribe just smiled and moved on quickly. ... The lead strategist appointment did not come easily. 3 cabinet members objected formally, citing the need for stability during the transition period. One cited Miguel's age. None of them cited his secondary gender directly, because the Eastern Campaign record was sitting in front of them, and they were not foolish enough to invite the comparison. They cited it indirectly, in the phrasing around family obligations and the demands of a new position during a sensitive time. Miguel presented his case himself. He brought the campaign record, the administrative framework, the settlement agreements, the projected revenue from the new Eastern Territory over the next decade, and a proposed reform agenda for the strategic office that he had been writing in pieces for 2 years. The session ran 4 hours. The appointment was confirmed by the end of it. His family sent a formal letter of congratulations. His father included a handwritten note that was 2 sentences long and said nothing that wasn't also about the Voss name. Miguel read it once and filed it. The pregnancy became visible in the 3rd month after their return, which was also the month of Aldrich's coronation ceremony. The court talked about it. The court talked about everything, and this gave them 2 things at once: the interim emperor's elevation and the lead strategist's condition, which was more than enough material for several weeks. Miguel continued working. He attended the coronation ceremony in his official capacity, standing in the cabinet row, and if anyone in that room had an opinion about his presence, they kept their mouths shut. Aldrich's hand found his, briefly at the end of the ceremony, in the general movement of the assembled court. Nobody could have said with certainty that it was deliberate, but people continued to gossip anyway. The marriage registration was filed on a Tuesday through the civil office with 2 witnesses. Miguel had chosen Tuesday because the cabinet had a full session and most of the court would be occupied. His family arrived at his office the following morning. His mother sat down without being invited and looked at him with an expression he recognized from his childhood, the one that meant she had prepared for this conversation and intended to finish it. "You could have had a ceremony," she said. "I didn't want one," Miguel said. "Is attached to the interim emperor's household now, regardless of how the registration was filed," Miguel said. "The social capital is identical. You know that." His mother looked at him for a long moment. "I can see that you're not happy with us," she said. "I'm not unhappy," Miguel said. "I'm busy," and made it very clear that he did not want to talk at the moment. She left an hour later. His father didn't come at all, which was its own answer. Miguel returned to the reform agenda. The reform he pushed first was the one the cabinet expected least. He put forward a proposal to integrate the Omega track students from the Academy's East Wing into joint sessions with the strategy track. A structured exchange program, starting with 2 sessions per term, with full access to the operational documents that the East Wing had never been given. The cabinet objected. 2 noble houses sent formal letters of concern. There were 3 days of corridor arguments Miguel was informed about secondhand. He had anticipated all of it, and written the proposal so that the path of least resistance was for them to approve it. The pilot program was authorized for 1 academic year. He sent the formal notification to the Academy himself. The response from the East Wing took 4 days. It was signed by the current head of the social placement track and 14 students. The last signature on the list was Sarah Aldrin. Miguel looked at it for a moment. Then he wrote her a separate note, brief, confirming her inclusion in the first session. He took his maternity leave in the 7th month, which was later than the physician recommended, but earlier than Miguel had planned. Aldrich had presented it as a scheduling observation, rather than a request, which was the only framing Miguel would have accepted. The reform agenda ran without him for 6 weeks, managed by the deputy he had trained and the framework he had written. It ran well. He had made sure it would. He came back on a Monday, 3 weeks after the birth, and walked into the strategy office to find his desk exactly as he had left it, and a new document in his queue. A proposal from the East Wing students, submitted formally through the proper channels, suggesting an expansion of the joint session program. It was well argued. The sourcing was correct. The logic held. Miguel approved it the same day. Aldrich found him that evening in the South Tower. Miguel had never moved offices. He had considered it once, and decided the inconvenience was useful. It kept casual visitors to a minimum. "The East Wing proposal," Aldrich said. "Approved," Miguel said. "I saw." Aldrich sat down. "How are you?" "Working," Miguel said. "That's not what I asked," Aldrich said. Outside the window, the palace grounds were quiet. "I'm well," he said. The deputy managed adequately. The reform timeline is 3 weeks behind, but recoverable. The East Wing cohort is stronger than I expected. "Miguel," Aldrich said. "I'm well," Miguel said again, and this time he meant it. Aldrich looked at him, Miguel looked back. There had been a version of his life, not long ago, in which this office was the endpoint. The appointment, the reform agenda, the record that couldn't be dismissed. He had planned toward it for years, and built every step with that horizon in mind. "The Eastern Territory liaison reports are due Friday," he said. "Your brother's first formal assessment. I'd like to review it with you before it goes to the council." "Saturday," Aldrich said. "Friday I need you somewhere else." "Where?" Miguel said. Home, Aldrich said, for one evening. Miguel picked up his pen. He made a note in the margin of the document in front of him. Saturday, he said. Aldrich stood, walked towards Miguel, took him in a warm embrace, and proceeded to kiss him like he was the only thing that mattered in the world. Everything was how it was supposed to be. Quote of the week. Power corresponds to the human ability not just to act, but to act in concert. Hannah Arendt. Thank you for listening to the Omega Strategist. Hope you enjoyed this story. If you want to hear more, please like, subscribe, and comment.